yeah, I just said it already, member of the International Theological Commission for a second mandate till 2026. So thank you very much for coming to Vienna and we are listening.
Thank you, Professor Thomas. First, let me express my joy to be here and to take part in this international conference. Thank you once again for the invitation. The history of the Eastern Catholic churches in the Middle East is marked by lights and shadows that have shaped their ecclesial identity within the Catholic Church and the communion of church. I would first deliver some remarks saying that I will not approach the ecumenical issue today in my presentation. Secondly, I selected some events, documents, or moments of the Eastern Catholic Church's history that reflect lights and shadows, and that help us to understand better the future of the church. Of course, the perspective is of a Middle Eastern and Greek Catholic priest. Since the renewal of Catholic ecclesiology and the Second Council of Vatican and the rediscovery of the ecclesiology of communion, the current status of Eastern Catholic churches, meaning sui juris, can only be understood under the sign of Catholicism. However, the synodal process launched by Pope Francis in 2021, especially during the celebration of the two assemblies of 23 and 24, has revealed the ambiguity that still reigns about the place and the role of these churches in Catholic communion, and thus in the ongoing ecumenical dialogue. Mainly with the Orthodox churches from which they emerged. There's a difference in the image that these churches have of themselves and churches as churches of apostolic origin with their own liturgy, discipline, and theological approach, and the image by which they are perceived by the other, I mean by Roman Catholic or Orthodox Church. It's not by chance that Pope Francis is entrusting the 10 study groups with the most delicate current issues removed from the debate of the Synodal Assembly. And he wanted the first group to look at the relationship or some aspects of the relationship between these churches and the Latin Church. My presentation doesn't claim to anticipate the results of this group, nor to provide an answer to the question posed. It's limited to a few observations in the historical development in the life of the Eastern Catholic Churches, as well as in their relations with the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Churches of the Middle East. Could these lights and shadows contribute to the decreasing of tension and the promotion of communion, synodality, and the mission of the Church? I will start with the question: the Eastern Catholic Church is United Rites or Union Church? And I will abort the question of the double phase of the reunion with Rome. It is certain today that the theological and non-theological factors that led to the emergence of these churches are multiple. The Latin missionaries and the desire to establish post-Tridentine ecclesiology played an important role, but we must not forget the stakes of the meeting with Rome which constituted an opening to the European Renaissance and a promise of commercial exchanges and freedom of movement recognized within the Ottoman Empire to Western citizens, ressortissants. But this Roman Union was marked at the same time by the suffering of the separation with the Orthodox Mother Church. The commemoration of the 3rd century of the Milkite Greek Union in 1724 reflected the complexity of the events leading up to the Eastern reunion. Some even think that they have shattered the dream of converting the entire Byzantine Church to Catholicism and have contented themselves with the return to the Berkai, to the fold, of a few groups from the Eastern Church. Despite the non-reception of the Council of Florence and the fall of Constantinople, the Melkites, for example, continued to believe in the union according to the Florentine Oros, ensuring a certain balance between the universal jurisdiction of the Pope and all the rights and privileges of the other Eastern patriarchs. These churches claimed to be, regardless of their numbers or their ecclesial or political impact, the legitimate heirs of the Apostolic Church. They saw themselves as the bridge between the two separate Christendoms. But how were they regarded by Rome, who considered them rather as Orientals united and called them rights? What was really the contribution of the missionaries, and what was the conception of rights that lead, in my point of view, to the alienation of the Eastern tradition? Sent by the propaganda fidei to the mission land, considered as mission land, the missionaries were seen mostly as brothers coming to the aid of Eastern Christians who were suffering under the Ottoman yoke of ignorance, misery, and oppression. These were from their mother. These were considered somehow as the saviors. And little by little, in order to distinguish themselves from their mother churches, these new Eastern churches adopted Roman theology and abandoned their own, thereby creating a schism between the liturgy and theology, between prayer and knowledge. Before the arrival of the Latin missionaries, Eastern theology was mainly found within the liturgy. Scholastic and post-Tridentine theology has replaced the mystagogic dimension in the practice of the sacraments and has led to the separation and reversal of the order axis of the sacraments of initiation, introduced changes on confession and marriage, established the celibacy of diocesan priests, and the spiritual concept of the personal priesthood promoted by the creation of seminaries in the image of Roman seminaries. All these changes were treated by the Orthodox as a betrayal of the common tradition and as alienating innovations. The disputes between Melkite priests and missionaries over confirmation, which they maintained in the order of initiation, are only one example among others of the theological and ecclesiological alignment of Eastern Catholics. It is then a question of unitism or of ecclesial union. The model of the union of the Eastern Catholic churches cannot be considered in any case, as Monsignor Destivelle mentioned, as the one that prevails to re-establish unity between East and West. I'm trying to analyze the development, the evolution in the Eastern Catholic Church's history. Then I would say all this happened before the First Council of Vatican. And then came the Uniate crisis and disappointment by the First Council of Vatican. In the context of post-Tridentine ecclesiology, the Roman Church is the Universal Church. The Eastern Catholic churches were then called rites. I recall the debate between the Melkites, who understood the rite in the sense of the church, and the missionaries who insisted on the supremacy of the Latin rite because it is the rite of the Pope. And the other discussion about whether the new converted Orthodox should be welcomed in the Roman Catholic Church, it is the model, or within the parallel Eastern Catholic Church. The tendencies with regard to the Orientals ranged from the firm desire for uniformity, for fear of their return to to the recognition beyond the liturgical rites of certain privileges and characteristics of their own, out of tolerance and in the expectation of their complete assimilation to humanity. Even some so-called legislative synods contributed to the organization and establishment of the Eastern Patriarchal Churches, like, for example, the Maronite Synod of Loisy in 1736, the Synods of Carcassonne of Jerusalem in the 19th century in the Melkite Church. They were submitted to prior and subsequent Roman approval and failed to define the autonomous status of these churches within the Catholic Church. The crisis that broke out on the eve of baptism, the first with the publication of the encyclical In Suprema Cetri and the letter reversals concerning the election of bishops, revealed the elements of the universal ecclesiology that reached its apogee through Pius IX's desire for uniformity. He was advised and pushed by Joseph Valerga, the future first Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, after the restoration of this patriarchate, which was always considered by the Greek Melkite as an exception and something not really accepted. This crisis has revealed the confrontation of two ecclesiologies that have become stranger to each other: separation of the power of order and that of jurisdiction, the reductio to the plena potestas, the concepts of universal pastor and universal jurisdiction contributed to the elaboration of papal dogmas at Vatican I, which, according to the Melkite Patriarch Gregory II Yusuf, cut off the way to the union between the Orthodox East and the Catholic West. Having been excluded from the deliberations of the Eastern Commission on the Latinization and uniformity of discipline, because, according to the member of this commission, the dualism in discipline was due to schism. The Patriarch considered that the identity of the Eastern Catholic Church was present. He left the council with the anti-infallibilist minority, discouraged, disappointed, and pessimistic. The other Eastern Catholics were divided between submission and discussion. Then came Leon XIII's open and conciliatory policy. His plan for the revival of the Eastern mission and the promotion of the Eastern Catholic churches was the opposite of the rigid and exclusive spirit of Pius IX. Referring to the reports of Vantelli and Carlos Gallian, as well as of Cardinal L'Ingenieur, he launched official initiatives like the Eucharistic Congress of Jerusalem in 1893, the Patriarchal Conferences in 1894, and the role of and the encyclical Orientalium Dignitas in 1894. The Patriarchal Conferences represent privileged moments dedicated by the papacy to listening to the grievances of the Catholic patriarchs of the East without succeeding in providing a remedy for all the problems raised. Orientalium Dignitas changed the language and the orientation and took a great interest in the Eastern Catholic Church, but still regarded them with a unionist eye. They were perceived as different Romans who would enjoy some tolerated ritual peculiarities in view of the hope for return of the separated brothers. The most important initiative of the pontificate of Benedict XV vis-à-vis the Eastern Catholic Churches was the creation of the Sacred Congregation for the Eastern Churches, for the Eastern Church in singular, on March 1938. Created by the motu proprio Dei Providentis 1917, this congregation constituted a fundamental organ for the revival of unionism. The erection in Rome by the motu proprio Orientis Catholici of 1917 of a Pontifical Institute for Oriental Studies intended to promote the revival of Eastern Christianity and the return of the schismatics, following in the unionist perspective. What about discipline, codification of canon law, and the congregation for the Oriental Church? It's certain that Father Del Po, the White Father and founder of the collection of the Orientalia Christiana Analecta and Periodica, was not lacking in courage and was able to tell the truth in a report intended for the Roman Curia to insist on the Catholic dimension of the universal church, which dimension could not be limited to Latins. Among the major obstacles to the union, he mentioned the Latinization of the Eastern discipline. To remedy this, it was necessary to return to the provisions of the Union of Florence, absolute respect for rights and the establishment of discipline that existed before the split of the 11th century. The author adds that the jurisdiction and privilege of the patriarch should be respected and not allowed to be absorbed by the apostolic delegates. The promulgation of the first codification of the canon law for the Eastern Catholic Church in plural in the years 1949-1957 was generally well welcomed, except for the last section, Clericali Sanctitati, because of the reaction of the Melkites against the perception of the patriarchs and patriarchates. Two questions were then raised. Is it about particular law, Oriental Church, or particular Oriental Church, or a common law about adapted Latin law or adapted Oriental law? That was just before the Second Council of Vatican, and the question was moved to the conciliar debate. At the Second Vatican Council, for the first time since the separation of the 18th century, the Eastern Churches was officially called to collaborate in the preparation of an ecumenical council. The Orientals take an active part and occupy an important place. Here are, for example, some suggestions of the Melkite Synod in 1959 and the proposals for the council, teaching of the tradition of the Eastern Fathers in seminaries, simplified the regulation on communicatio in sacraments, revision of the canon law on the celibacy of priests, adaptation and liturgical renewal, the revision of Eastern canon law, the role of the Curia and Pope-Bishop relation. I really wonder, because all these themes, all these topics were still discussed during our first and second assembly of synod on synodality, and they are still up to date, I would say. We can simply say that the Eastern Catholic Rites was recognized as churches finally, and the statute of patriarchal churches with synods was re-established. You can refer to Orientalium Ecclesiarum 7 to 11. Although the ecumenists' objections, Orientalium Ecclesiarum was finally promulgated, even its reception and implementation after the council was not respected. I would like to address a special homage to Patriarch Maximus IV, Bishop Neophytus Edelby, and other Melkites who defended the identity of Eastern Catholic churches in the spirit of Catholicity, of the mystery of the church and the collegiality. It's due to Maximus IV that the Synod of Bishops was created by the Pope Paul VI in 1974, and a more openness to ecumenism was possible. He was among the first prelates that demanded the ecclesial recognition of the Orthodox Church. He insisted on representing the absent brother. Of course, in the framework of this presentation, we cannot go in more detail. But I would like to recapitulate some conclusions about these different phases of our history. Although the solicitude of different popes vis-à-vis Eastern Catholic churches and their inspired initiatives through the last 3 centuries, it's important to mention the following elements. First, we have to recognize the ignorance of the Eastern traditions and institutions within the propaganda fide and the Western churches in general. The lack of knowledge about the legitimacy of their conciliar institutions or synod led Roman officials to restrict patriarchal authority in the hope of reshaping it in the image of the purely honorable prerogatives of the Latin archbishops. Second, some confusion of Pope Pius IX between ritual or liturgical privileges and disciplinary autonomy, as it is clear in Reclara Gratulationis from 1894. The distinction between the Eastern Church and Eastern churches, singular and plural, that introduce an ambiguity regarding the identity of these churches. Fourth, intimate collaboration among Eastern hierarchies during the 2 Vatican councils and even within the synodal process. There is no one voice for Oriental for Eastern Catholic churches. It is really sad. And sometimes the Curia used some of them against the others. That happens, for example, with the reaction of Patriarch Hassun, the Armenian, and Beni, the Syriac, against the speeches of Gregory Yusuf to Vatican I. Within the post-Tridentine ecclesiology, the Catholicity of the Church was misunderstood and not accepted. Lumen Gentium marked the concept in the 2nd chapter, mainly in the paragraph 13. The Catholicity made the ecclesial recognition of Eastern communities as churches possible, even until yet not really fully received or implemented. Second part of my presentation, entitled Towards an Ecclesiological Model of Synodal Communion. The challenge of Catholicity and the ecumenical challenge. Today, in the context of the synodal process, there would be great interest and benefit for the Catholic Church in rediscovering the meaning of Catholicity through the prism of synodality, as preached by Pope Francis. Otherwise, the Eastern Catholic churches will never be recognized in their own identity. Despite all the problems from which they currently suffer, they remain a sign and a guarantor of this Catholicity in the communion of churches, communio ecclesiale, within the Catholic Church. In other words, all the speeches in the context of synodality, including on the regional or continental regroupment of churches, and the autonomy to be granted to them through decentralization called for salutary in the final document no longer make any sense. Moreover, the ecumenical dialogue, despite all the improvements and the importance of the document on the Bishop of Rome, analyzed by Monsignor de Sibel, that had just been published by the Dicastery for promoting Christian unity, will remain unsatisfactory and will not lead to any outcome. The sign of Catholicity is indispensable and complementary to those of unity, holiness, and apostolicity of the Church of God. The 3rd century commemoration of the first reunion with Rome of an Eastern Church of the Middle East, in the mother time, the Greek Melkite Church challenges Catholics and Orthodox and invite them to reread together, thanks to modern historiographical tools, their common history, and to heal from their wounds in order to continue together their journey toward the restoration of unity. I know very well that what the reactions of some churches have been to the Balaman document, in which the two families of churches have recognized the error of the past, which had led to new separations rather than unity. But 30 years after its publication, it's necessary to recognize the positive points of this document, which recognize the ecclesiality of our Eastern Catholic Church, their right and duty to ensure pastoral care for their faithful and to participate in the ongoing dialogue. It is kairos, a favorable moment to review the reception of the ecclesiological and practical principles prevailing in the Balaman document. I also know the difficulties of the current situation of doing this together with our Orthodox brothers. But at least we must learn the lessons that concern us and move forward to the path of unity. Then we have to dissipate some canonical confusions. It seems to me that the work of the first synodal study group on the relations between the Eastern Catholic Churches and the Latin Church should in no way be limited to the solution of a few problems of jurisdictions that have arisen here and there because of the immigration or the mismanagement of ecclesiastical problems. Only a more or less objective rereading of the history of what is called the uniate phenomenon will allow us to redefine the status, place, and role of our Eastern Catholic Church in the Catholic Church and within the ecumenical movement. This effort should be the work and collaboration of theologians, historians, and canonists. I would like to draw special attention here to 2 points that seem to me to be essential. The first refers to the paragraph 132 of the final document of the Second Synodal Assembly, which recommends a profound change in the relations between our churches and the Roman Curia, more specifically the Dicastery for the Oriental Church. Without a synodal partnership and a serene debate, nothing could be achieved and will be not recognized as two unique churches. The context of the creation of the Congregation of the Oriental Church in 1917, which took us out of the concept of mission land and trust to propaganda fidei, has totally changed today and will have to change in the light of the rediscovery of synodality. No one will be able to decide for us. The time has come to transform this dicastery from Eastern Church into for the Eastern Church into the dicastery of the Eastern Church. The second reminds us that the fault never falls on one partner alone. Our churches and patriarchal authorities are also responsible for the situation we are suffering from today. I personally find that the request for a synod of patriarchs around the Pope, or that of a person, in other words, universal jurisdiction of our patriarch or archbishop, is not realistic nor prudent at this time. We have to discuss this together in a synodal way. In order to remove any kind of confusion, the patriarchal churches of the Middle East, while insisting on their communion with all Eastern Catholic churches, prefer to be distinguished from the Greek Catholic churches on the European continent and Eastern churches of India or other traditions. This distinction should in no way blur the fraternal relation between them. On the contrary, starting from everything that is common, it should strengthen consultation and collaboration between them in all areas. To mention only academic exchanges, such as our current conference, it is recommended then, with the framework of the synodal process, that the code of Eastern canon law be revised and that new elements related to the synodal process be taken into consideration. Conclusion. Synodality offers our churches today a framework for renewal and discovery of our identity after Vatican II and Balaam. Can we seize the opportunity and make a serious and loyal effort for the good of the Church of God and for our Eastern Catholic churches? The years to come will reveal to us the rate of reception of synodality in all its benefits and beyond all resistance. Are we open really to a new model of full communion or of being church in different ways, not to be either Catholic or Orthodox in a historical and traditional way? The years to come will reveal also the capacity of the Catholic Church to listen to what the Spirit is saying today. Is really the Catholic Church ready to change? I remember, but not exactly, that Pope Francis said, our church is not yet ready for change. It's not bad. It is a kind of learning. We have to learn. Synodality is a dynamic reality, which means that we have to move on and to be open to a creative new ways of communion. Through the glory, if the Catholic Church has still the capacity to listen to what the Spirit is saying today through the plurality of voices and contexts. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this presentation. As you said, we have to discuss this together. Now we have time for such a discussion, around 40 minutes, and I would like to ask you all to stay here because before the lunch break, we would like to make a photo